Witchcraft for Wayward Girls is really good. Sup dogs, welcome back to my channel. My name is Alex and you're here at Farm G Reads, and today I want to do a little what I have read so far this year type of a video. So I love monthly wrap-ups. I enjoy watching them. I really enjoy filming them. Sometimes they get a little bit tedious. I would like to maybe try to figure out a way to make them a little bit more fun to film, but I just love at the end of the year having a digital journal, almost like video diary of the books that I read for the year. So I don't want to get too far behind on it this year. I didn't do one for January, so it's March 1st, and I did finish 2 books today, which we're going to just throw them in there. So I have read a total of 35 books since the beginning of the year, which pretty good, not complaining too much. I would also like to preface before I get into this that if you follow my Book of the Month backlist challenge, I am going to go over Book of the Month books that are part of that video series that I haven't yet edited and posted. So if you don't want spoilers, skip this video, go watch something else though, subscribe, etc. Without further ado, let's just get right on into it. The first book that I read this year was The Husbands by Holly Grammaggio. If you see a Book of the Month on the corner or on the spine, you know it was for the challenge, so look away. This book was interesting. So this is a sci-fi read following our female main character who finds that one day after a hen party, which is like the British version of a bachelorette with her friends, she comes home and she's married, and she wasn't married when she left. And she finds that anytime a husband comes out of the attic, a new one, and if she sends him back up the ladder into the attic, a new one will come down. So Lauren spent 200 pages of this book basically absolutely roasting most of the husbands that come out. I found her to be kind of an unlikable character, and although the premise of this is really interesting in theory, the execution just wasn't quite there for me, so this was just a 3-star. Also, if I don't give a star rating for everything, c'est la vie. I'm honestly considering canceling star ratings and just talking about book, but that's so far out of the realm of how I can possibly use my brain cells right now. The next book that I read is The Crimson Crown. This is by Heather Walter, and this is book 1 of what I think is going to be a duology. It's kind of like a sapphic Snow White and the Evil Queen retelling, but if the Evil Queen was the anti-hero that we all love. I surprisingly really enjoyed this. This was a very classic sapphic romantasy, and it was really well done. I thought the characters were really likable. I don't have a physical copy, so now I can't think of anyone's names, but I think it borrowed themes from Snow White without completely being a straightforward retelling. That made it a really fun and unique fantasy read, and the way that it ended slapped. Cannot wait for book 2. I think the cover is really pretty. Book 2 cover is also really pretty, so definitely hope to get that on the shelves one day. I think I gave this a 4-star, and I do recommend. So if you haven't heard, I am spending 2025 trying to achieve a goal that I just now recently in 2025 set out for myself, and that's reading the entire Stephen King backlog. I thought I was a fan, but I was wrong. I have so many books to read. I'm doing pretty good. I'm up to 10-ish, 9, 8. I'm doing all right. But the first one that I read for the year is The Eyes of the Dragon. This was written in the 1970s. He wrote this for his daughter, and it's a very classic, dark fairy tale, evil wizard in a tower, casting spells and poisoning people kind of a vibe. And we get a character that has started showing up in the Dark Tower series and also in other series and books of the Stephen King universe. And I just love this cover. I got this beat up piece of shit version of it on eBay, and I just absolutely love it. This was a really enjoyable read. And I mean, not the most riveting Stephen King material, right? But overall, really fun fairy tale vibes. Okay, the next book is Under Lock and Key by Lana Ferguson. I would like to preface by saying I love Lana Ferguson. I did not love this Lana Ferguson book. So the other 2 that I have read by her, I think are her only other 2 releases. No, I've read all 3 of her other releases. The Nanny, The Game Changer, is that what it's called? Whatever her hockey one is, and also not The Nanny, but I can't remember now. We're gonna have to go look. But anywhoozles, Lock and Key is following our female main character that comes from America to Scotland, and then the male main character is a Nessie shifter, which in premise I think sounds very good. But the pacing was a little bit off in the middle, and I just didn't believe the fake mate. Okay, the nanny, the fake mate, which is a alpha omega, omega verse wolf shifter monster romance. I really liked that. That was a 4. The nanny was a 5. The game changer, yeah, that was a 4. Under Lock and Key was a 3. Yeah. So things that I liked about this, the Scottish vibes. I thought that I was going to like the monster romance aspect of it, but it was actually kind of cringy. And if you're going to commit to something that you have to suspend your disbelief to that level, there needs to be a little bit more buildup, and that just wasn't there for me. So I only gave this one 3 stars. But I love this author, and she's got a new one coming up, which is a lawyer romance that I requested on NetGalley, which I'm definitely not going to get, but whoever publishes that, if you're listening, I will take a copy. Okay, so we are going to just go ahead. You know what? And maybe just give this the old clip. That looks bad. How am I going to do this? Maybe right there, and hopefully the sound isn't too bad. The sound will only be bad momentarily. So I just am going to group these. You know what? I can do this. I'm just going to group these all together because there's no point in talking about them separately. The next, I guess you want to say 5 books that I have read for my little Stephen King challenge, also part of the 35 books I have completed this year, are the first 5 books 1 through 4, and the novella 4.5, Went Through the Keyhole by Stephen King. These books are part of the Dark Tower series. This follows our main character, Roland, who is a gunslinger in a world called Midworld, and we find out very quickly that not only are there multiple worlds in this universe, is it ours? Is there an Earth? Who could be too sure? And Roland's sole goal is to get to the Dark Tower. And I kind of know, but I don't know. And I am just so excited. Allie and I are buddy reading this with the guidance of our friend Liz, who loves this series. And we have Wolves of the Calla up next. I just pulled it and put it on my TBR cart. So I'm really excited for that. Okay, see? Boom. And then we put it right back. How easy was that? Okay. Lost and lassoed. I loved this. Okay, Lost and Lassoed is book 3 of the Rebel Blue Ranch series by Lila Sage. If you're not reading cowboy romance, that's cool. Let me know what romance you are reading down below, but I very much like cowboy romance. I will say that I only made it through book 1 of Chestnut Springs, and I haven't picked it back up, and I've heard mixed reviews about the Wild Love, whatever that spinoff series is by Elsie Silver, but I can tell you that the Lila Sage series is worth your time. So book 3, this one is following the single dad, Gus. Is it Gus? Yeah. And then Teddy Anderson, who is Gus's little sister's best friend. And the little sister, now I can't remember her name, but she is the love interest in book 1 with Gus's best friend. So many characters crossing over. I love series like this, especially romances, because it's really fun to get attached to characters in book 1 or 2, and then they show up in book 3. This one, my camera is gonna, oh my god, battery is gonna die. I have to be fast. This one I thought was the spiciest one. I thought the romance and the chemistry was the best, and honestly, I thought Ava was gonna be my favorite female main character, but Teddy is so far winning of the single dad thing. Didn't think I was gonna like it, and I loved it. And book 4, Cam and Dusty, done, deceased. All right, let me switch this battery and we're gonna move on. Okay, we've fixed that problemo. Okay, next book I want to talk about is Valley. This is by Stacey McEwen, and this is book 3 of the Ledge trilogy, or the Glacian trilogy. This series is about a fantasy world where we have a town in a hot, humid climate at the base of this giant mountain and a river, and at the very top of the mountain, where there is also also a chasm, there is a ledge, and there is a group of people that were snatched up from this town, put up there, and up away from this town, there is a group of people that are the ledge dwellers. They live on the ledge, and quite literally, it's this ice cold, just like horrible climate on the side of this mountain that overlooks the chasm. And every so often, they get supplies dropped off by the glacians, which are these basically like albino flying humanoid creatures. But also in betwixt all of those kind of like supply drop-offs, the glacians also come and snatch villagers up from the ledge and carry them away. And Dawson is our female main character. We meet her on the ledge. She is the last of her family, and she gets taken by one of the glacians. And that's how we start off book 1. Book 3, I thought was better than book 2, and I thought really tied up a lot of ends. I enjoyed the ending. I enjoyed the lore kind of behind what ended up happening in the end. You can't really talk too much about a book 3 of a trilogy. I ended up giving this 3 stars. Book 1, I think I gave 4, and then book 2 and 3 were like a 3. Book 3, this one maybe a 3.5. I do enjoy this series. I just think the pacing kind of got off a little bit, and between the time I read book 1 and book 3, I just think like what I am looking for in my TBR is more fantasy and just a lot less romantasy, or even fantasy with romance. So that's just a me thing. I say that, and then like a ton, and then like a ton of these reads are fantasy romance. So yeah, okay. I'm gonna group these next 2 books together as well. So as part of the Stephen King backlog journey, I also read The Shining and book 2, which is Dr. Sleep. I have watched the movies. I had never read the books before, and The Shining was so good. I gave that 5 stars, and Dr. Sleep I ended up giving 4 stars. Really enjoyed that one, and honestly, I'm kind of glad I had seen the movie for Dr. Sleep first, because I think it helped me picture, probably turn the mic at least towards me. I feel like it helped me picture what was happening a lot more clearly, and like less just straight absolute banana sandwiches. I have no idea what's going on, Stephen King fever dream. That kind of gave me like an anchor point. I do think that The Shining is like up there with Misery, Pet Sematary, just like the best of the best Stephen King. But Dr. Sleep, for being like a sequel many years later, both in the book's timeline and also when Stephen King wrote it, I think it follows up to The Shining really nicely. If you don't know what The Shining is about, that's insane, but it follows our main character, Jack Torrance. Him, his wife, and his young son are going to the Overlook Hotel, where he's going to be the caretaker over the winter. The Rose are all going to get snowed in, and things are going to get absolutely insane. He's trying to quit drinking. I'm sure you can imagine how that's going to go. And yeah, it's so good. Some of Stephen King's best. I am just loving reading so much Stephen King. Oh my gosh. Okay. Blood Over Brighthaven. So I read M.L. Wong's newest release, Blood Over Brighthaven, and I absolutely loved this. I have no critiques. It's incredible. So the magic system, I think, is what makes this book so unique. We have our female main character who is living in a world where they don't necessarily like let people in, and now it's gonna bother me. Let me scroll out. Let me backtrack. The opening scene of this is so violent and gory. It like immediately got my attention. I could not look away. I was there. So the opening scene is one of our main characters, Tomel. He is crossing over this like icy lake into the main city beyond Tehran. So he's crossing over with his family into this magical city called Tehran. He is from the outskirt where people just consider everyone a savage. So he's essentially just like scum when he enters this town. It's very much a commentary on current political situations, I would say, for sure. So I cannot say enough good things about this. Tommel very soon meets our other main character, Siona, who is born and bred, raised in Tehran. She has always trained to go to this academy where she's going to practice the magic system. The magic system is basically like typing spells and writing them on this fancy typewriter, but part of the magic system is part of the problem. And that's all I'm going to say about this. This book, I think, although it needed a little bit more editing, and I think M.L. Wong has some growing to do as an author, this was immaculate. I loved everything about this. I loved Siona's character arc. I loved the beginning. I loved the ending. I loved the in-between. Like, this is a standard to me now of what a standalone fantasy should be. Like, it's got over 35,000 ratings on Goodreads, and it's at a 4.43 average. Like, yeah. So I gave this 5 stars, needless to say. And now we're completely out of order, but I did also read Sword of Kaigen because I loved Blood Over Brighthaven so much. I was like, I cannot contain myself. I have to read Sword of Kaigen. So I buddy read it with my friend Olivia, and I gave it 3 stars. I think she gave it 4, maybe 3. What can I say? So Sword of Kaigen is also a standalone fantasy that is part of the universe that M.L. Wong has other works in. But as far as the characters in the story, like beginning to end, in the 600 and some odd pages that Sword of Kaigen is, your story is resolved, your characters are resolved. Like, you're not going to get anything else anywhere. And in saying that, I think we spent too much of the 600 pages focusing on the wrong areas of world building. There was a lot of focus on completely introducing a new language and a new hierarchy. Like, it was trying to do too much in too little time, whereas like Blood Over Brighthaven was very clear and concise in what we needed to know. And it was very literally a closed system. Like, we were only focusing on one city. This was focusing on an entire empire. And I think the way that we were supposed to picture it got crisscrossed. So were we in like a feudal Japan-like place? Were we in a modern day because there were towers and cell phones, and that part didn't really get explained? There was also no explanation as to why the main things and the main conflicts that were happening. And for you to be a standalone fantasy, that has to happen. So in essence, this book is about the Sword of Kaigen, which is a group of territories on like this peninsula in the greater empire of Kaigen that are considered the sword because they are the best of the best military-wise. And we come to learn that they are just actually living in a very sheltered, very propaganda speech type of situation. And it goes from there. Again, also the characters. Very likable, most of them. The ones that we hated. And then we had some traumatic scenes. We had some angering scenes. And then the way that everything was supposed to tie up kind of happy with a bow at the end, I just wasn't a fan of, because the main conflict that we have was it was very much psychologically abusive, but it was bordering on the line of like almost like domestic violence-y abusive. And I just didn't like the fact that we were supposed to accept a lot of that at the end. Again, I don't want to give any spoilers away. So I ended up giving that one 3 stars. I personally just think that Blood Over Brighthaven was superior for, what it was, but they're also two vastly different books. So you kind of have to know that going into it as well. Okay. Hell yeah, brother. Now that we've done that, let's get back to it. So where did I leave off? Okay. The next book that I want to talk about is one that I read in, I think, my weekend reading vlog, which I will link somewhere up below, above, as above, so below. I'm starting to worry about this Black Box of Doom by Jason Pargin. This author is also the author of John Dies at the End, which I think is also a movie. I haven't read the book or seen the movie, but I really did enjoy this book. I ended up giving it 3 stars, but I thought the premise was really good. The pacing for the book only covering like a span of 2 or 3 days was also very good. Characters very well written. What kind of lost me was towards the end, the believability just like completely went out the window, and it went from being like sci-fi, is it aliens, is it nukes, like what is it, to almost being like a story of lost love and lost treasures and blah 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 blah. And I was like, no, that's not what I wanted. But overall, I think it was really well done for the premise. So essentially, we have our main character who is Ubering or he's driving the Lyft, and he picks up a girl on the side of the road with this giant black box that's all locked up. And she's like, I need you to take me across the country to Washington, D.C. You cannot ask me what's in the box, and I'm not going to show you what's in the box. And that's it. And we go from there. And like, it gets into like Reddit trying to figure out what's in the box, and people finding them in real life from the internet, and very like woke 2024 TikTok is going bye kind of a vibe, which I actually enjoyed because, again, it was well done. It was just kind of the ending didn't really do it for me. So the next book I want to talk about is To Poison a King by S.G. Prince. This was gifted to me by Allie, and I am so thankful that she sent this to me because I effing loved this book. Okay, I want to talk about the big reason why I almost didn't want to love this book, and I'm still almost questioning myself for enjoying this book. And I would also like to discuss the way that I convinced myself that it's okay that I liked this book. So this book is following our main character Celine in her kingdom. Her mom Persephone is the palace apothecariist, essentially healer, whatever, and she leaves because she convinces Celine to poison the king for her. Celine is the one that actually puts the poison into the glass. Her mom is the one that makes it. As Celine gets older, after Persephone flees, she basically takes the place of Persephone. And as you can imagine, her and the king kind of have a love interest thing going. My problem is that Celine is 14 going on 15 when it starts, and he's 23. So nothing happens until she's much older, I think 20. But the fact that it starts when she's so young is just screaming grooming. And I'm it's a fantasy world, but at what point does it make me a weirdo, I do want to say that is a huge issue that I had. I ended up giving this 3.75 though, because it's just a very classic and well done kind of dark fairy tale type of a story. It's one and done. It has a resolution at the end, although I will say that the ending was very abrupt, and that also made it lose stars for me. But the main issue that I have with this is that age gap kind of starting when she was way too young. So that is something to note about this book, but otherwise I thought it was really good. And there's a second one coming that's set in this world, but it's not following our same characters. These characters are their story is resolved. So I'm really enjoying picking up fantasy reads that are not series because I have too many of them. Okay, we have another book of the month one upon us. This one is Age of Vice. This is by Deepti Kapoor, and this was a January 2023 pick for me. So this was not that long ago that I chose this book, and by the time I was done with it, I was like, why was this even written? Nothing about, okay, let me backtrack. This story follows our main character, who is named, oh gosh, AJ. We start off with him being incarcerated because he is accused of vehicular manslaughter, essentially. And over the course of this massive 500 and something page book, a little over 500 and something page book, we follow AJ for the most part up until about the halfway point, I would say. His story, in the current timeline, and then also his upbringing, which is interesting. And then it becomes a little less interesting because we have just been at it for so long, and right when you think something's going to happen, the POV completely changes for the second half of the book to people that no one cared about, rehashing the events that we've already discussed, and the ending was bad. This was a 2-star. I did not like much of anything about this, and I read in the reviews that it's going to be a trilogy, and I was like, for fucking what, brother? I don't know. I did not care for this at all, and it was a Good Morning America pick. What are they talking about on that show? Because they need to talk about something else. Anyway, I don't want to dwell on it too much because I do talk about it in the Book of the Month episode that it pops up in, which I don't even know if it will be up. Probably not when I post this one. So but I did not care. Okay, cool. Anywho. Okay, the next book that I read / would like to talk about is Model Home. This is by Rivers Solomon. I borrowed this one from the library and have already brought it back. But this is a very interesting take on the haunted house. It is a haunted house of an affluent family in a gated community, but the family is Black and they live in a gated community that is all white except for them. And that's kind of where the haunted house aspect of it, it kind of approaches it from a racial angle, which I thought was really well done and a really interesting take on the haunted house, right? It's a house of horrors. because of what the family went through, because of what the daughters went through. So we get the POV from the three daughters that have left the home because they felt that it was haunted, and now they come back because their parents, something has happened to them, and that's all I'm going to say. I thought this was really well paced. The cover is astounding, and it was a really quick read. It's not long, and in an age where, like, I think horror is just booming as a genre, we get a lot of haunted house horrors, and this one was absolutely unique, absolutely well done, very well written, and I'm super pumped to see more from this author. I think I gave it 4 stars if I am remembering correctly, and regardless, I think looking back on it, it's a 3.75 to 4, so I feel good about that rating. Okay, this is another book of the month one. I actually like this one though, so spoiler. The next book that I want to talk about is The Last Russian Doll. This is written by Kristen Loesch, and this was part of my last episode that I filmed for my Book of the Month challenge, and this one was from March 2023, so another fairly new one, and I am surprised by 2 things regarding this book. Number one, that I picked it because I am just so okay with admitting that I don't love historical fiction, usually unless it has a romance and or fantasy element to it, but this one took me completely by surprise because that's the second thing I'd like to say about it. I really enjoyed this. I gave it 4 stars. I thought that for being a historical fiction, we had so many other themes of found family and love lost and like love through the ages, and like, okay, there I am. It's a historical fiction and it had a lot of love. There was like a murder mystery to it, timelines, you know, spanning across time and space, just all the things that I just love. So the majority of it, we get the POV from Rosie, who has defected from Russia, is now living in England and attends Oxford. She decides to take an internship and return back to Russia to try to find the man who unalived her father and her sister. Her mother has just recently passed away from alcoholism, and that is a theme that always resonates with me as a reader. So this just had a lot of things that I enjoyed. The Russian history aspect was fascinating. Russian culture is very close to Greek culture, and I just liked everything about this. It was very well paced, very well written again, and really accessible for historical fiction. So I will also definitely be keeping this. If you follow my book of the month, like bit that I am doing, I decide whether I'm going to keep the books after I read them. And I am actually excited to start including more historical fiction into my reading so I can keep that and then like make a whole video, make a whole Instagram post, like start doing more genre specific things. Okay, we're going to talk about this very, very briefly because it's too heavy and I don't want to talk about it. Wind and Truth. This took me 8 million years to read, and it felt like it took 8 million years to read. Now, okay, it took me like a month to read this. So Wind and Truth, if you don't know, is book 5 of the first arc of the Stormlight Archive. This is by Brandon Sanderson, who is the author of many, many books in what he calls his Cosmere. Well, there's not tons of books in the Cosmere. He has written a ton of books. Some of them are in the Cosmere. Mistborn, the first trilogy, and also the second arc are all part of the Cosmere, and there are going to be another 5 books after this initial arc to tie up the story of the characters that we follow in Stormlight Archive. And I can tell you now, having read all 5 books that are over 1,000 pages, some of them 1,200, this one was 1,300. I don't think we need another 5 books to wrap anything up. I think we could have wrapped it up. For example, this Behemoth is over 8 days. That was unnecessary. Wind and Truth, I cannot possibly talk to you about this series too much in depth. I do want to make a video that's going to be like slam full of spoilers where I do kind of get into it very in depth, but what I will say is that Wind and Truth was an absolute slog to get through. It was a rehash of the first 4 books. It was reminiscent of Oathbringer, where it was just fluff to get us from A to B, and the thing was, we could have gone from the end of Rhythm of War to the end of this and been done. We could have probably ended this series with Rhythm of War if we really wanted to, but here we are. And I just can't fathom what books 6 through 10 are going to entail that we couldn't possibly like have just been done with by now. I don't know. I just feel very strongly that Brandon Sanderson has maybe lost the thread of what he wanted to do with the series, but I'm a newer fan, so what do I know? I absolutely still love him as an author and will obviously continue this series, but I ended up giving this one 3 stars, whereas all of the other books minus Oathbringer, which got 4, all the other ones got 5, so yeah. Sorry, I'm not sorry. My camera is saying something, but because it's too hot. Let's take a break. All right, fine. Hold my tiny microphone. The next book that I want to talk about is Long Live Evil. This is by Sarah Reese Brennan, and this is immaculate as far as a concept goes. The concept of this book, which is book 1 of the Time of Iron series, follows our main character, Ray, who is terminally ill. She's about 20 years old, and her last few months on Earth have been spent kind of just like passively talking about a fantasy book series and discussing it with her sister. And really that like bonding experience is what she's enjoying. But she finds herself one day waking up in the hospital. This random stranger is there asking her if she would like to be in the fantasy series. And she's like, hell yeah, brother. So this book is, you're okay. Go lay down. This book is following Ray, who is inside another story. So we have a story within a story, and it's super confusing. So the first half of this book, there's a lot of world building, and it's all telling and no showing, which is really difficult when you have, especially I think like a story within a story, because we've suspended our disbelief twice. We've suspended it to believe that this terminally ill woman is now in a fantasy book series, and we have to suspend it even further to kind of correlate her experiences living in a modern day like world now being thrust into this fantasy world. The other problem that we have is the disconnect. We have characters that are in the fantasy world that are just like accepting of the way that Ray speaks, and she's very cringy millennial. The whole book is really kind of cringy millennial. I ended up giving this 3 stars, honestly, without getting too much into it. I just didn't care for how it was done. It was also like felt very grammatically just all over the place, really run on like long sentences that were just trying to be pretty and flowery when we didn't need that. If you're gonna go this route with the premise, you're basically writing a fantasy world, and she did not do a very good job of that, unfortunately. So I don't think I will be keeping this book or continuing the series, unfortunately, because I do really enjoy, what this was trying to do kind of premise wise. Okay. Next book is Quicksilver by Kelly Hart. Holy cannoli. I can't believe I read this and I liked it. So I gave it 3 stars, but I did enjoy it. And when I give a book 3 stars, it doesn't mean just a gosh darn thing about like, I don't know. 3 stars just feels so, you could have loved it or you could have hated it. And for some reason that still gets a 3 star. And this was one of them. I do want to continue the series. I don't think this was like mind blowing in its content or in its writing. But as far as a romantasy goes, it was pretty good. It wasn't cringy, and that's all that I can really ask for. So this follows our main character, Cyrus. See, steel trap. So Cyrus is living in the Silver City. I can't remember what the name of like the actual Silverin, I think. And water is a hot commodity, if you will ignore that pun. It's like a very dry, arid climate, and she's a thief living in the 3rd ward. I did talk about this in my weekly reading vlog, I think, that I just posted. But she gets pulled through a pool of quicksilver, which is the substance that allows certain people to travel through as like a portal to different worlds. And she gets pulled through by Kingfisher, who is a fae, and she finds herself in the land of the fae, which was always just like fairy tales and myths to her growing up. And she has now found herself in the world of the fae, and we kind of go from there. And she is the only one that is kind of like has been able to open this portal. So that's why the fae have just like not been around. Of course, we have a romance between between Cyrus and Kingfisher, which I thought was really well done. I enjoyed the spice. Some of the spice was actually kind of cringy. I said it wasn't cringy, but some of that was actually kind of cringy. But overall, for a romantasy, I thought it was like a really quick read, and I think it's going to be a duology, so I will definitely pick up a book 2, which I think is coming out later this year, called Brimstone. The next book we did not have such good luck on, and that is Onyx Storm. If you don't know what this is about, we're not going to talk about this too much anyway, but like look up, just open your eyeballs and you'll know something about Onyx Storm, because this is the book that took the reading world by storm, some would say, this year when it came out. And I don't know why, because Rebecca Yarros, I respect what she's doing here, her and her family. This just feels like a cash grab at this point. We ended book 2 exactly in the same place that we kind of end this book on. I don't think anything happens of substance. I think a lot of things that happen kind of get like negated and or wrapped up at the end in a very convenient couple of scenes, one of which we don't even really experience ourselves. The losses that we have in this are characters that I'm like, okay. The first 150 pages are just characters and places thrown at you that you've never heard of, we never see again, and we never hear about again. And someone please tell me that it was annoying that we spent 30% of this book in the islands that were just to the south of where the map is in this. Okay, we have this beautiful map on the inside and outside, like end pages of the action happens down here, and you're telling me no one could have drawn that in? Like, that's just like so cheap to me. Yeah, I didn't like this. I gave it 2 stars. Let me know in the comments if you would like me to make an entire Empyrean series roast video, because I would love nothing more at this point. How much money and time I've spent on this. Fourth Wing, I will stand by, was a good book because it introduced a lot of readers to a level of fantasy that they didn't know was achievable because of the romance, because of like the shadow daddy aspects of it. But I just think at this point, it's very clear that A, she needs a new editor, and B, she doesn't really know how to write fantasy, and also C, Red Tower is just also cash grabbing at this point. So yeah, I don't know. I very well might be done with this series and be donating. So I grabbed that book for no reason. Okay, the next book I want to talk about is Next to You by Hannah Bonham Young. This is an author who is just a new auto buy for me. I have her newest release, Out of the Woods, ready to go on audiobook from Libby, but this one is following our 2 main characters that meet through mutual friends at a New Year's Eve party one year and share a New Year's Eve kiss, and then become friends who just remain in the friend zone but each want to be more with each other, and they're just so stubborn and dumb, and we get to watch it flourish because she buys a bus and he is a Samoan mechanic who helps her renovate the bus. Come on, don't you want to read that? So it was so good. I gave this one 4 stars. I do think Still Out on a Limb is like a 5-star immaculate romance, but this one was really good. I just found that the chemistry wasn't as strong for me, and that was because of our female main character. Was it Lainey? Yeah, Lainey. Just like didn't feel as important to me as our main character was. In things are getting out of pocket here. My camera keeps overheating. My dog keeps smacking around. So I mean, she can do no wrong, but we're gonna speed this up. Okay. The next one is another Book of the Month spoiler, but it is Definitely Better Now by Ava Robinson, which I think may be a debut novel for this author, but this is part of I accidentally paused and didn't cancel my Book of the Month subscription and ended up with 5 new Book of the Month books. This is following our main character, Emma, who, yep, I was right, is an alcoholic, celebrating 1 year sober, and is now finally able to get back into dating and relationships. She is part of Alcoholics Anonymous and follows like the big book. So that says that she wasn't able to have any sort of romantic relationships to not like replace her addiction with sex or love. So we kind of follow her trying to navigate sobriety and the dating world in like a modern day social work and social lives mixing together type of culture, which is exactly why I no longer let my work and social lives mix together, because she definitely gets herself in kind of like a dramatic embroilment in the workplace. But I actually really enjoyed this. I gave it a 3-star on Goodreads, but it feels like more like a 3.5. I thought the sobriety and like flashbacks to her alcoholic days, active alcoholic days, I should say, were really representative of what it feels like I would know. And I thought that it was really relatable. Oh, and we also have this huge thread of like her dad is also still an alcoholic and they have a really rocky relationship, especially now that she's sober. And we kind of have like a big thread kind of going with them. I really enjoyed this. I talk a lot more about it in the episode of my Book of the Month backlist challenge that it's in, so I won't say too much more, but I really enjoy the cover as well. So if this is a Book of the Month option for you, I do recommend that you pick it up. A very nicely done literary fiction debut. Okay, Before They Are Hanged. Oh, okay. So the next book I want to talk about is part of the First Law trilogy by Joe Abercrombie. This is my first experience with this author as I thought grimdark fantasy was a new genre for me, but it's not. It's like Game of Thrones, John Gwynne, like Fury of the Gods, Shadow of the Gods series. And this is very dramatic and dark and gritty like that. So turns out I'm a huge fan of grimdark fantasy. I just didn't know it had that name as a genre. Anywho, Before They Are Hanged is book 2. We follow a number of different characters kind of in this feudal, the North is always cold and at war with everybody type of fantasy setting. And book 1 introduces us to a number of characters in this world that meet up and a lot of different things happen, including the first of the Magi, who comes back and kind of takes a bunch of these guys on this quest. And we are in the quest in Before They Are Hanged. I absolutely love this. Ate it up. It's available on Kindle Unlimited, all 3 books, and I actually am currently reading 3. Can't really talk about this series. It's so hard to talk about a book 2 or a book 3 in a series without spoiling anything. But if you like Game of Thrones or you like John Gwynne as an author, this is so up your alley. My only complaint, there is not nearly enough female representation in this series. It's like all mainly male main characters, but it's just so well written. And the one badass main male character that we have that is a woman is an absolute badass. So it's fine. Night Bitch. Wow. Okay. By Rachel Yoder. I listened to this. This book is insane. It is actually about a woman that is convinced she's turning into a dog. And it's just such a heavy commentary on motherhood. Again, not reading what a book was about kind of bit me in the ass instead of helping me. So going into this blind, I just wanted a weird book about someone turning into a dog. And I did get that. But it was mostly about the costs of motherhood and how difficult it is to rear a child, especially in this day and age, and the societal aspect of being a mommy. And she's with these, she calls them the book mommies and the Mommy and Me library group. And I'm well, I don't have any of those. This book is the definition of a weird girl literature. If you like Mona Awad, anything, Mayfly or anything by CJ Lead, you would like Night Bitch. This is Chlorine, Jade Song. Yeah, this is also up there with those types of weird girl literary fictions. Okay, Sunny Place for Shady People by Mariana Enriquez. I just talked about in my weekly reading blog that I just posted, but I did end up finishing it. Don't know if I finished it in that blog or not, but I enjoyed this. I gave it a 3 stars. It didn't blow me away, and I thought that the first half of the short story collection was better put together than the second half, although I did really like the content of the very last story. And this is also a translated work, which I always enjoy reading those. So I definitely enjoyed it. It's a quick read, and the horror was understated. So if you're looking to dabble in horror and you want something quick, this was a very digestible collection of short stories. Next book I finished today. Yesterday. I don't know. Immortal Longings by Chloe Gong. Okay, here it is. Again, spoiler, book of the month, spoiler. So this is touted as a YA retelling of Shakespeare's Cleopatra and Antony, Mark Antony. And by the end of it, I kind of was Romeo and Juliet. And then I saw Shakespeare still, and I was yep, all that checks out. This was shockingly good. So this is book 1 of, I think, a duology. I do have book 2, Vilest Things, on my Kindle, which I'm very excited to get started because we ended this one on a very nice cliffhanger. But this book follows 3 main characters, Anton, August, and Kala, who live in a world that reminds me of like an Eastern Asian inspired Ready Player One type of a world. Very ramshackle, very neon lights, Tokyo, Japan, but there's a lot of poverty, there's a lot of strife, and we live in this world where people are able to jump and they can like move their ki, which is their soul or their person, their conscious, from body to body. And every year, to boost the spirits and economy of this world, they have the games where 88 contestants randomly get drawn out of a lottery and they have to muck duck each other until one person is left standing. And our 3 main characters are entangled in these games in one way or another because they have ulterior political motives. Wow. This, just talking about it, makes me want to shut up and go read book 2. This was so surprisingly good. The romance is understated, the spice is understated, like barely even there, but impactful. And like, I don't even know why I'm bringing it up, because the politics and the magic system and the writing were what really got me. The characters are great. It very much reminds me of Shades of Magic trilogy by V.E. Schwab. I am absolutely obsessed with this author and very excited for book 2, especially with, again, the cliffhanger that this ended on. This was a 4-star read for me. Very excited for book 2. Hopefully will live up to / exceed the rating. Can we finish this video? A, before my camera explodes. B, before my battery dies. The world may never know. Okay, but hopefully yes. I also finished 2 books today that we're going to talk about real quick. So the first one is Witchcraft for Wayward Girls by Grady Hendrix, who is an absolute auto-buy author for me. I talked about this in my little birthday book haul on my weekly reading vlog, but I did end up finishing it today, and if I hadn't been so dehydrated earlier, I would have cried at the end. The last few scenes and like the last 25% of this were just absolutely heart-wrenching. I ended up giving this 4.5 stars. I can see why people are like, why there are mixed reviews about this, but Grady Hendrix writes female characters all the time, and I don't think he did anything with these teenage girls that are pregnant that is anything crazy comparatively to his other female characters, but what do I know? So this book follows a group of quote-unquote wayward girls, unwed mothers, whatever you want to call it, basically teen moms, that are sent to a home in Florida to have their babies and come back home and act like nothing ever happened, and they get embroiled with some witches they find in the woods. And that's all I'm going to say. I really, really liked this. I would definitely check trigger warnings and content material. There is a lot of talk of SA. There is definitely child abuse, racism, a lot of topics that are difficult to handle. And my battery is going to die. BRB. We're back, baby. Oh my God, that was the fastest I've ever changed a battery and come back. Okay. Witchcraft for Wayward Girls is really good. Yeah, I enjoyed this. Definitely, again, check your trigger warnings. I think I already mentioned that. But what can I say? Grady Hendrix just gets how to write tension. He writes very understated horror, very funny horror. This is not funny at any point in time. It's very difficult to read at a lot of points. Again, like I said, it would have made me cry if I weren't so dehydrated earlier. But I loved this. The cover is absolutely stunning. And I'm really happy that I got to it before it got spoiled. Again, I went into this super blind. All I knew was it was about teenage pregnant girls in I believe this takes place in the 70s, which also is insane to think about the way that we treated. Oh my gosh. Yeah, this book is really hard to read, but it was fantastic. I ended up giving it 4.5 stars, and I regret nothing about that decision. Okay. I read this book today. So this is a part of my current Book of the Month episode that I am filming, but this is The Whisper Man by Alex North. I had read The Shadows by Alex North in a previous Book of the Month episode and only given it 3 stars. And granted, I also gave this one 3 stars, but it's a better 3-star than the other one was. I just don't think that there's anything thrilling about a thriller in this day and age, if you will. Why did I read it in one sitting, you may ask? I don't know. It was just like a very kitschy, very easy to read, very fast. I was just like speed reading this shit. But this is about Tom and his son Jake, who move into a new house in a new town after wife Rebecca she has a heart attack unexpectedly, and we pick up with Jake saying that there's a monster outside his bed that whispers to him through the window. At the same time, we have a serial killer kind of thread going. The tie-in across those two kind of storylines, I think, was very interesting. It was introduced at a really good time. It kind of had like a sad, bittersweet culmination at the end, but the whodunit aspect, I think, was kind of a cop-out. And again, not a lot of female, I mean, it's called The Whisper Man, so fine, but like not a ton of female representation, although, yeah, because the lead detective was a woman, but like the majority of the POV from the detectives was the male Pete, and like that is made obvious as part of like one of the reveals, but come on. Okay, but this also was from August 2019. So if you're following the book of the month, will I keep this? No, I will not. But I will leave you to watch that episode where I do talk about it more. Actually, I don't think I've even talked about it. I'm too tired to do it tonight. But yeah, anywho, those are the 35 books that I have read so far in 2025. Thank you. If you watched this video, please leave cowboy hat emoji down below. Giddy up, y'all. Subscribe if you aren't already so we can chit chat about more books, and I will see you in hopefully March wrap up because it is March 1st. So with that, I'm gonna grab my Kindle and go read in bed. Bye.